Hello and welcome to Chapter 33, The Shadows of War with FDR. The first main idea of what we're doing in this pre-war period is that we are very, very isolated as a country. We are wanting to make sure that we are staying out of these actions that are going on in Asia and in Europe. This would be something that would be a very good continuity through time, all the way from George Washington's warnings about foreign entanglements up through today's ideals of isolating. Some of the different key components of this isolationist theory would have been the WWII committee and the promotion that there was some ideas of war profiteering, or the munitions factories and the bankers getting us into World War I so that they could benefit monetarily. The Neutrality Acts were passed because of that, and we'll cover those here in just a second. Another idea behind this is that we were going through the Great Depression and we need to handle our issues here. One of the major groups that is promoted at this time and organized is the America First Committee, headed by some people like Father Coughlin. A very well-known speaker of theirs is the aviation celebrity Charles Lindbergh, and their moves and their motives and ideas were highly regarded by Adolf Hitler. They were all about, obviously in their title, America First. They were talking about it's us against and not worrying about the world affairs, and that we should just take care of things here. Passage of the Neutrality Acts and then the renewals in 1936 and 37 made it so that if the United States President declared that there is a foreign war occurring, we are required to stay out. Okay? This is an overwhelming sentiment of the United States to stay out of the war. We did not want involved again, just like we had not wanted involved in World War I. Dr. Seuss, some of you will remember from when I reserved the museum exhibits that come in from Cincinnati. This is one of his political cartoons of his career during World War II. Referencing America First and the fact that it is okay if we treat foreign children poorly in our country because, well, they're foreign and it's all about America First. We start to see some shifting ideas as actions continue to go on. The appeasement process is not working. We've seen the rise of these fascist dictators, Mussolini, Hitler, and Franco in Spain. By the time 1939 rolls around, we've seen that appeasement is failing. Hitler is never living up to any of the promises that he makes in terms of no more land once we allow him to occupy the Rhineland. Then he goes into Austria, then he goes into the Sudetenland, and every time, each step of the way, he promises this is the last aggressive move that he makes, and obviously he lies every step of the way. In September 1st, 1939, he invades Poland. Great Britain and France declare war. Very soon after, we create the cash and carry provision of our Neutrality Acts. We are still trying to stay out of the war, but we want to be able to help the democracies that are fighting against these dictators. And so if you come with cash and if you have your own ships so that it is not our ships moving the materials, we will sell you things. We also make a deal to sell a bunch of our outdated destroyers to escort those ships back and forth through the U-boat wolf packs in 1940. In exchange, we get some military bases, some naval bases around the world that Great Britain was no longer needing or using, and we made this trade called the Destroyers for Bases trade. The Lend-Lease Act is another step up. We start to see these processes going on. We see that the war is not going well for the Allies, and so we decide that we need to help. They have run out of cash, and so we say, well, we will let you borrow them. We'll let you lease these for a time period. In the upper right-hand corner, you see a couple of Soviet guards beside a Willys Jeep, and that is one of the most commonly purchased items through the Lend-Lease Act, trucks and Jeeps for logistical supplying and movement of things. In August of 1941, we see the Atlantic Charter, an 8-point deal, mostly Churchill and Roosevelt, but a lot of the Allied powers getting together and starting to create this idea of what might happen after this war is over and how the U.S. may need to get involved at some point. Again, we mentioned the three major fascist dictators of the time: Mussolini, Hitler, and Franco. Along those ideals, just a short explanation of what fascism is. It is a complete and total dedication to the state before anything else. You lose your sense of your own identity, and everything you do is supposed to be dedicated to your national government. This is an extreme form of nationalism that goes on. The three leaders, if you'll notice their pictures, each one of them makes sure to associate themselves with their military. That is a key aspect of this extreme nationalism. There's usually some form of racial motivations as well, most easily seen with Hitler and the Kristallnacht events, and then the Holocaust against the Jewish people. Couple of agreements. One that was not surprising: Hitler learned many of his tactics from Mussolini, so the Rome-Berlin Axis agreement between Italy and Germany occurs, to where they're going to be the major allies of each other. But the surprising one was the non-aggression agreement between Hitler and Stalin. This surprised the Allied powers and worried them, because if those two could get along, we didn't know what was going to happen next. Luckily, Hitler, not being a man of his word as always, ends up breaking the non-aggression pact and invading the USSR, which solidifies them onto the side of the Allies. Other various terms that you should know: Kristallnacht, one of the very first attacks on the Jewish people, violent attacks. It roughly translates to the Night of Broken Glass. The policy of appeasement, where we, the Allied powers, especially Great Britain and France, bend over backwards to continue to give Hitler what he wants in order to avoid a possible war. The battle in and around Dunkirk, the siege there, is major and important. The fall of France, obviously. What is called the phony war. Once they have conquered France in some of these areas, then they kind of sit on their hands and nothing goes on. They're wondering what's going to happen next. And then the key Battle of Britain. By this point in time, Britain is the last fighting democracy in Europe against Hitler and the other fascist dictators. And this is one of those times where the United States is watching very closely, because if Britain falls in this air battle and then it allows an invasion, we would have been next. We have stayed very isolationist throughout this times. Again, we are starting to change over and do some things to help who we know will be our allied side, but we are still trying to stay out. That changes throughout 1940, and then 1941 it gets stronger and stronger as an association towards who we will be helping, and then also the final straw that breaks it to where we will join the war. We see a lot of our escort destroyers and our ships being attacked by U-boats in the Atlantic Ocean. We see that the American public starts understanding and seeing that these attacks are not going to go away, that there is going to have to be an intervention that goes on. We're going to have to face up to the fact that Japan continues to expand its aggressive tactics in the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean. One of the key victories in the pre-war era is that FDR gets elected again. This is a precedent that is broken. All presidents had left after their second election, and he gets elected in 1940 for the third time. And then we have the major attack that ends this section of isolationism. On December 7th, 1941, one of those three dates that I am really picky about my students. You need to know that date. You're an American, come on. Japan attacks the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. That is not a state in 1941. It is still just a territory. But the attack is extremely violent. It destroys a lot of our Pacific fleet. We see that roughly 2,500 Americans die in the battle. And the final key factor to this is that this is what drives us to enter World War II. We declare war on December 8th on both Germany, Japan, and Italy, or all three of those. And so we are now fighting not only a war, but a war on two fronts: the European and African theater against Germany, Italy, and their allies there. And then the Pacific Theater against Japan and some of their allies there. The Pacific Theater will become the largest battlefield in all of history. On this date, it is also important to remember that Japan attacks approximately 8 other sites as well across the Pacific realm. This demonstrates their well-coordinated, thoughtful strategic planning and the fact that they truly did believe they could and should rule over the entire Pacific Ocean area. I've listed a few of the other sites that they attacked on December 7th and 8th. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a good day and continue to look at your reading guides and the terms from the concept outline.